You're listening to Bigfoot Society, and I'm Jeremiah Byron. In this show, we go beyond the campfire stories to bring you firsthand encounters from people who say they've seen something impossible, from backwoods trails and remote mountain haulers to quiet farms and crowded highways. The stories come from everywhere, and each one leaves us with more questions than answers. These are the voices of the people who've lived it, so settle in, because today you'll hear another account that just might change the way you see the woods forever. So stay with us. All right, Bigfoot Society, we've got the privilege of talking to Beth Duncan today from West Virginia. Beth is a Bigfoot researcher, investigator, and witness, and happy to have Beth on the show today. It's been a long time coming, but it'd be great to hear what she has to share from this area of West Virginia. But welcome to the show, Beth. How are you doing today?
I'm doing amazing. Thank you so much for having me. I wanted to start out, I am from Southern West Virginia, and I have quite a few stories. But I would like to start out with a few people in my family stories first. We live in Southern West Virginia, and deep in the Appalachian Mountains. When my grandfather used to go fox hunting, and he would go back up into the mountains, and there was a place up in there that he always warned us about going. But he always liked going up there himself to hunt. And one time he went up and they called it the Meadow Hill Holler. And when he went up in that holler, something pushed him on both of his shoulders down a hill. And he dropped his weapon and had to grab and pick it up and start back down the hill. And he said that his feet was moving so fast that he couldn't keep up, and he kept tripping down the mountain. My mama, now, Papa always called them the old men of the mountain, and I always thought that they were some sort of hobo, or I really didn't know what the old men of the mountain really was, but I knew that it was something that I was supposed to be afraid of, if that makes sense. And I knew that there were certain places up in there that I wasn't supposed to go. Now, Mama, her family on her side, they always called them boogers. Mountain boogers, or just boogers, and there was a place up in the holler. She would say, "Don't go up there; the boogers will get you." So we always had this healthy fear of certain places up in the holler. Now, our land, we have 100 acres of land, which it's a pretty big place up in there. And the way that this land is constructed is there is a road that goes up the holler, and on both sides is mountains. And in between this is the road and like little garden plots. And when you get to the head of the holler, it's a big field, and then it backs up. You go back up the mountain, and you get to the power lines and like the telephone poles and stuff. I'm trying to give you an idea, so when I tell my stories, you guys will kind of understand, how everything looks. Now, when Mama used to tell us not to go up in there, they had stories that they always told about things happening to them, and also when we were little and we was up at the head of the holler, up at the spring, we were gathering water, and they kept hearing something rustling in the tree line, and we couldn't see anything. But eventually it got to the point where it nerved them enough that they told us that we needed to gather our things and we needed to start walking out of the holler. And I could see on Papa's face that it was something serious, and they wouldn't really tell us what it was. But I knew that I needed to listen to him and to do what they told us to do. And they kept telling us, and it was about a mile walk out of there. And they kept telling us, do not run. Whatever you do, don't run. What you do is you just keep your head in front of you and just keep it at steady pace, and don't look up on the side of the hill, and just don't run. So we knew that there was something to worry about, but we didn't know what it was. And later on, they kept saying it probably was a bear. But when we got older, it was kind of said to us that it was one of the wood boogers or the old men of the mountain. Let's see. Now, they always had this thing that they would tell us. It was the ghosts in the creek, the ghost horses in the creek. And they always tell us about the ghost horses, that at nighttime that you would hear these ghost horses in the creek, and they would go up and down the holler. all the way up and down the holler, up and down the creek, and you can hear them clunk, 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 just like how horses would do. And when you would stop walking, they would stop walking. Well, later on, like this is after I started investigating, I put my recorder out there, and lo and behold, guess what it was? It was the Sasquatch. Let's see, what else? Oh, my aunt has had accounts of something throwing rocks at her house. And she's also seen, it was like almost getting dark, and she could see something that ran down the creek and up the hill. And my other aunt actually watched this big black shadow jump in her 5-foot dog lot and jump back out and run up the mountain screaming. Right down the road from my holler is a state park that we have. And I'm not going to mention the names or anything, but it's a really beautiful place. And, we played there since we were little and had no idea that anything could have, like Sasquatch could inhabit that place. We had no clue about that stuff when we were little. But anyways, my friend Rachel actually had an account at the park. Her and her husband were parked right there. It's only 2 miles from my house, but they were parked at the park, and they were in one of the parking lots, and they were eating. And it was nighttime, and she said that you couldn't see a hand in front of your face. They turned out the lights in the vehicle, and they were just sitting there. And after they got finished eating, she flicked a cigarette out the window. And as soon as she flicked that cigarette out the window, something had jumped on the back of their vehicle. And they had one of these little compact, like SUVs, but it was compact. It was these little tiny Broncos. And whatever it was jumping on the back of her vehicle. And it noticed that if it would jump a little faster and harder, that it could hold the front of the vehicle up. So it was doing that. And eventually it jumped off, and the vehicle actually slammed back to the ground. And her husband finally got it put in gear and took off, because they couldn't go anywhere when it was up like that. But when it fell back down to the ground, they took off. And this little road out of there was really, really curvy. And they got almost halfway out, and something grabbed the vehicle again and almost pushed them off the road. And she actually said for years, whatever it was, they had the handprint of it on the tire, where it grabbed the tire and tried to push the tire. My brother was actually riding up the holler, and he was on his 4-wheeler. And he had his weapon and his little gun on his hip. And he had my niece on the back, his daughter. And while they were riding up the holler, my niece saw a rock fly out of the wood line, and it hit right on his gun. And he said that they flew out of there. He felt it hit, and he asked her what it was, and she was like, I have no idea, but it came flying out of the holler. One day last year, I was standing on the porch, and this is so weird because my porch is like 30 feet from the wood line. And I had just a rabbit foot, just the bone and all rabbit foot, fly right in on my porch and land right at my feet. I'm not saying that it was Sasquatch, but I'm just saying that was very weird, which I believe it was. There's this legend about the Polk Mountain Monster that everybody talks about around this area. And it's a Sasquatch. They talk about this Sasquatch that lives in this area. And back in the 50s and 60s, the 70s and 80s, everybody's seen this monster. And it frequented so much that back then, most of the residents around here had seen it. And since we're speaking about that, here recently, in the last year, actually, there were 9 sightings at the local park that I live by. Not only that, but my neighbors, 4 of them, have saw it in the last 10 years. So now I want to go ahead and start out by telling my story, because I wanted to let everybody know, the history of this place and what we've had to endure all our lives before I tell my story. And that's it. I thought it would be good to tell about the holler too, so you guys kind of get an idea of where I came from and about my grandparents. But my story, what happened to me was back in 2000, and I think it was 17, 18, somewhere in there. I was going through a lot. I had an ex-boyfriend that was really horrible to me, and he had ended up in prison. I had split up with him. I told him, I don't want nothing to do with you anymore. You need to leave me alone. And when that happened, he got angry and he ended up in prison. And he would call me from prison and he would really, really bother me, wouldn't leave me alone. And it was to the point where I would want to cry and couldn't cry in front of my kids, and I'd have to go for walks and, relieve myself and cry and just feel better. On this certain day, the day that all this happened, he had called me and, made me feel horrible and made me feel like I needed to cry. And I wouldn't cry in front of my kids. So I had my daughter, which was 17 at the time. I had her to watch the two boys, which was my little boy, the littlest one was 1. And TJ, he was, I think, 14, 15. And so I had her to watch them while I walked up the holler. And I noticed as I was walking up the holler that things weren't feeling right, even in my emotional state. Like things just in the holler weren't right. There were no birds. I didn't see, and this holler has so much deer, and there were no deer. It was so quiet. And, I thought about after I got so far up there, turning around and coming home. But I thought, if I don't go up there and just, relax and calm down, then it's not going to help a bit. So I continued up the mountain. I got up the holler and then turned back around to go up the mountain to the power lines in the graveyard, which is at the very top of their property on the 100 acres. And I get up to the graveyard and I sit there for a little while. And then I get up and I walk up to the power lines, which at the power lines, it's absolutely gorgeous because it's on the top of the mountain. And you can see everything from the top of that mountain. And it's just beautiful up there. I was sitting there and I started to cry and I was a mess, like emotionally a mess. And I was crying my eyes out. And, finally I was kind of getting a hold of myself and I took my glasses off and I was cleaning my glasses. And over the hill to the left, I hear like this, it was like a grunt, like a really deep grunt. And because I'd never heard anything like that, the way that my mind kind of thought of it was like a really deep deer grunt, but deeper, way deeper. Like, and it had a raspy kind of a sound to it, if that makes sense. And what I did was I wiped my glasses off and I put my glasses back on my face and I turned to the left and looked over the hill. And when I did that, it was such a shock to see what I saw because I had never in my life seen anything like that. And what I saw was a Sasquatch, and he was standing over the hill and he was looking at me. And it was weird because he had one of his hands against a tree and he was kind of leaning back and forth, like just going back and forth behind that tree, just leaning and looking at me, peeking back at me. And then he stood just a little bit further out from the tree and was just staring at me. And at that point, like I kind of got this, it was like an eye lock with him. And I couldn't break this whatever it was. It was like almost like everything around him was blurry, but he was almost HD, like tunnel vision kind of, is the only way that I can describe it, because I was in such a, like, I was freaking out. Like I didn't know what this was. And it scared me to death. I'm going to tell you, it was the most traumatic thing that had ever happened to me. And to this day, it makes me kind of shake talking about it. It's scary. He was a cinnamon color. His hair was had red in it and a brownish red. But when the sun hit it, you could see like the red tint in his hair. He had full lips. And the only way that I could describe the nose was like those 80 treasure troll noses on the treasure trolls. Very distinct brow ridge. And he didn't have a lot of hair on the face. And then on the top, he had the knot on the head, which they call it a crest, but At the time, I didn't know what it was. I just noticed that he had like a hump on his head. And he measured, after we went back and measured it, at 7.5 foot tall. But as I was standing there and I was eye locked with him, it was like I couldn't break this whatever eye lock that I was in with this being. It was almost like I was so afraid to look any other way. I was scared that I don't even know. I couldn't take my eyes off of him. And I knew that if I went in the woods behind me, that could possibly be more of whatever these things were. See, the only choice that I would have was to walk in front of me, which was back down the hill I came. But the way he was diagonal in front of me down over the hill. So I would have to walk past him, which meant got a little closer to him to pass. So that's what I had to do. And I finally got enough courage to do this. And I could remember, like, my legs, when I would try to walk, it felt like my legs didn't work, and they were so shaky and tingly and numb that they wouldn't hardly walk. And I remember, every step felt like it was taking an eternity to get past this being. And I remember turning around to see where he was. And I watched him as he didn't turn his head, but turned his whole body to watch me. And he just watched me leave. He didn't try to do anything or follow me, but he watched me leave. And I remember I kept turning around thinking, I just please walk the other way. Just please walk the other way. And finally, that's what he did. Like, he just started walking the other way up the mountain. And I never felt so relieved in my life. And at that point, I started running down the mountain. I knew, like I talked about before, they taught me not to do that. But when you're faced with a situation like that, sometimes it's hard not to. It's fight or flight, and I was flying. I was going to fly down that mountain. I was getting out of there. And I remember getting almost home, and I peed everywhere. I peed all over myself. And I was standing, when I finally got home, standing at the bottom of that mountain, and my legs just felt like jello, like they wouldn't move. I was shaking. My body just felt it was horrible. Like, I couldn't understand what I saw. I couldn't go home because I couldn't tell the kids at that point what I saw. So I sat at the bottom of that hill and tried to ponder on what all this was. And I remember thinking, was this, all the things that we've heard when we were little, is this what they've talked about all these times? Like, what was this? And finally, when I did go home, I had my daughter, of course, to watch the little ones, and I gained control of my emotions and everything. And I started looking into it. And I got on the internet and I tried to figure out what was going on. And I looked, and the only thing that came close to what I saw, and it was the Patty film, and she didn't look exactly like the one that I saw. The one that I saw, it looked like a man, just a big hairy man. And, he had the brown eyes, and like, I couldn't see the teeth or anything, but he just looked like a big muscular giant man. And I always say, it almost looked like he was like 3.5, 4 foot wide. And I know that sounds huge, but he was huge. Like, this guy was, I'd never seen anything like it. But anyways, I started to try to figure out what this was. And I've got me an audio recorder, and I set up some audio. I set my audio recorder up, and I got some audio after a while of some sounds that I got, like screaming and howling. And I got on the internet, and I posted it on like a couple of Bigfoot pages. And I was asking people, do you guys have you ever heard this sound before? And a team from Wild and Weird, West Virginia had contacted me, which they're who I'm associated with now. But at the time I wasn't. And they contacted me, and they wanted to come down and do an interview and take a look at the holler. Well, I agreed to that, and they came down and, did a very thorough investigation and actually came up with a footprint and casted it. It's one of the clearest prints that I've ever seen. You can see all 5 toes, and it was right down in the holler. It wasn't at the top, it was down in one of the hollers that lead up to the power line. Because if you know anything about Appalachian mountains, it's going up and down mountains constantly. There is no flat land in the Appalachians, especially down here in the southern West Virginia. It's just it's crazy down here, but the terrain is unbelievable. But so they actually got a footprint down in one of the hollers. And one of the researchers, he had asked me, he said, because I was so scared, and I told him, I said, I don't want to go up there with you. I'm too freaked out. I just want to stay here. I'll tell you where to go. And he was like, no, it will really help you to come with us. You need to come with us. And so, he helped me along the way. Him and both of them did. And his name was Joe and Ron from Wildwood, West Virginia. And they had actually talked to me about, not being scared, and said, maybe he was just curious. Have you ever thought about, maybe he heard your voice and maybe he was curious. Maybe that's all it was. And he said, well, did he try to hurt you? And I said, well, no. And he goes, well, then maybe he just was curious. And you have to think about that, if he's staying hidden here, then he's got to know you. So, that really made me start thinking that, wow, these guys have been here, or the Sasquatch have been here all this time. And we really just, we knew kind of, well, the old folks knew, but they stayed so good and hidden from us that we really didn't have much of an idea that's what was making all these noises. Which, we thought about it. It was a thought every once in a while, but not really, we didn't really believe in them. Now, when they left, I started on my own journey, and I started to investigate all this on my own. And I kept sending them things and, casts that I took and some of the audio that I did. And they were really impressed by some of the things that I got. And they asked me if I would like to be a part of the team. And I told them, yes, I would love to. So, after that, I started going back out, and for a while I was scared to go back into the woods. But after that, I started to go little by little back into the woods. I wouldn't go far at first. It was maybe a few yards in at first and then back out. And eventually I got myself to, walking trails and stuff again. But it took a long time. It really did, to get me back to where I was able to go into the woods, because once that you have a traumatic experience, some people can't. Some people just can't after they see something like that. But I was able to, because, I always have to remember that, they didn't try to hurt me. It didn't try to hurt me. I was walking into their house, and he was just like, hey, what are you doing? What's going on with you? But anyway, so I started to really hardcore research and find things out about these beings. And what I found out was they're not an animal. I don't think that they're an animal at all. They've got a language. The audio that I've got, they actually have a language of their own. They sound like they're taking a breath in sometimes, and they're speaking while they're breathing in, if that makes sense. They make the cooing noises. I've got cooing on audio recording, the rock clanks, the tree knocks, the water sounds that they do in their mouths, the whistles, the chest beats. They chatter their teeth. What else? Let's see. It's just so many things that they do. I've actually caught, it sounded like them laughing on audio. I know that some people think that they're a form of, how do you say it? Gigantopithecus.
Exactly.
But I absolutely do not. Yeah, I do not think that they are Gigantopithecus at all. The structures that I've found that they do some very cool teepee structures. And one of the ways that I've noticed that they do it, they find a really skinny tall tree with a Y and really high up in the top of it. And they'll take these other long trees, and in that Y, they'll stick the Y part, the crotch of the tree up there. They'll stick these other sticks in between these trees. And they'll make like these teepee little structures like that, or not little, big. The biggest one I found was like 12, 13 feet tall. The they like to twist tree branches around here. Like when they break them, they just don't break them, they'll twist them, and it'll splinter off like all these little shards of splintering. Well, you know how you do when you twist trees, but and they like to, like, I found a weave, an intricate little weave here that they did. And the way they did it, it was like 40 feet up in a tree, and it was this limb that they had pulled down against the tree itself. And when they did that, the limb had like two branches that they pulled around the tree, and they twisted it to where it almost looked tied. And then they started, it was like with the ends of the little branches that they tied right there where they tied was actually like little intricate weaves and designs. It was absolutely beautiful. Then they'll do these other little small structures that they'll lean up against these trees. And these small structures, they'll take like 10 or 15 of these little, well, not little, like 6-foot sticks, and they'll stick them up against this tree, like, and only doing it like halfway around the tree. And sometimes they'll lay these rocks on these sticks that they're placing on the trees, and it looks really, really neat. Sometimes they'll do that. They also stack rocks here too. I found a bunch of stacked rocks in the woods. Now, I'm not going to say that some of them aren't human, because humans do that also. But the ones that I found and the places that I found them, sometimes it's just really hard to believe that a person would get back in there and do it. The footprints that I've collected, the casts, I've got about, I think, 10 or 15 of them, maybe a little more. I've gave some to the team to put with the collection, but actually Dr. Jeff Meldrum has authenticated a few of those, and Cliff Barrickman also. He's got to check out my stuff, and so he bragged on one, thought it was really neat. Now it's hard to get a good cast here in West Virginia because the terrain is so, like, the leaf litter and the terrain, it's just really hard to get a good cast. But when you do, you treasure it. They love to stick sticks in the ground. Like a lot of the things they do here, and I think it's to mark trails and stuff, but they will stick these sticks in the ground, like everywhere. You'll see them everywhere. And then they will, like, sometimes they'll lay another stick in one of the Y sticks, like the sticks with the V shape. They'll stick another stick in it and just leave it there like that. Or they'll lay the Y stick up against a tree on both sides. And then sometimes they'll do that, and they'll take a big stick and they'll lean it up against both sides of a tree, and then take little sticks and put it all down the big stick on both sides. So they do that also. And I found that most of the tree breaks, like if they're really large tree breaks, they'll lead to like large water sources. And then I found, like, if you find the smaller tree breaks, they usually lead to like smaller streams or like smaller water sources, like springs or natural springs or small ponds and stuff like that. So I thought that was really interesting. Let's see. But now I found, like, one of my favorite structures that they'll do is when a big giant tree will fall, and it makes like this divot in the ground where the roots used to be. And they'll take these big long sticks and they'll lay them from the bottom on the ground right before the hole, and they'll lay them up against the root, and it makes, when they do that and lay all these sticks up against it, and then they'll start throwing leaves on it, it makes like this perfect little blind, or this little hole for them to crawl back up in. And I've seen that numerous amounts of times that they do. And I also found that they use creeks and streams as like highways to get to point A and B, and especially in the Appalachian Mountains. They absolutely love to run up and down these streams, because usually one of these streams will lead to the next holler. So from these creeks and these streams, they can get anywhere they want in southern West Virginia and not be seen. So, and I've noticed also that the lakes, they absolutely love staying around the lakes around here. I find a lot of evidence around lakes. I think that's honestly all I've got. Yeah, I think that's about it.
You definitely live in an area that sounds like it's extremely active, and I believe the way that you explained it to me in one of your emails is that it's not just Bigfoot in the area. There's a lot of weird stuff that
Yeah.
happens in this area, and almost kind of like a Skinwalker Ranch type
Yeah.
setup. And I can definitely get that from things that you've told me so far. When you had your visual sighting and you were actually able to, you weren't breaking eye contact, which that's incredible. Was there any emotion to the Bigfoot at all when you were looking at its face?
It was almost, it was almost like empathy. Like it was almost like that it felt like it knew I was hurting. And it was weird because at the time, like, I noticed that, but I was so scared that I didn't care. I'd never seen anything like that before. And it scared me. It was the most traumatic experience I'd ever had. And yeah, and it was weird because it had human emotion. Like, and that's when I started to do my research. That's another thing that I kept hearing people talk about how they're just animals, they're just this, they're just that. But, as I'm getting like the samurai chatter and then language and mouth clicks and pops and mouth swishes, and I'm getting like tree language, even like the little glyphs on the ground and all this other weird stuff, like that's intelligent. And not only that, but like when I was listening to my audio, I heard like a juvenile, like one of the little juveniles, like say something, and then one of the big ones, like it was a laugh. Like that's intelligence. It's not just they're not just these beings that are just a dumb animal. They're very smart, very very smart.
From things I've heard over the years, and actually I can say now things I've experienced. I've not had a visual, but I've experienced some weird stuff. There's definitely an intelligence there, something that can respond if you verbally say, "Hey, are you there? Can you do something?" And then it does it, right? Does something. There's some intelligence there, and definitely in the way that you're experiencing as well. I do want to say you mentioned friends Joe and Ron. They're great guys.
Yes.
Talk to them. They are super, super guys. And I know we'll have lots of really good links in this show because you've been on, I believe you've been in some of the Small Town Monsters shows that Joe and Ron have out, right?
Yes, Paranormal Horizons. Yeah, there's 3 of them. And I wrote them down. I always forget because the names of them are so similar. And the names of them are the Sasquatch Mountain of Madness, Sasquatch Unleashed, and Mystery Lights and Sasquatch Holler. And I was actually on Small Town Monsters also, just theirs, which is the Mountain State Edition, and it's called What's in Those There Woods. I also did a podcast on the Cryptid Quest, Bigfoot Hollers in West Virginia. And it's, and I guess the reason why I want to do these podcasts and I want to talk to people about this is because, I get so tired of hearing the Gigantopithecus theory and hearing them treat the Sasquatch as if they're just these monkeys running around not knowing what they're doing in the mountains, when there's a reason why you don't see them,
Absolutely. I mean, they have got to be the best at, I mean, they're the best at hide and go seek for sure. And it's wild too. It's not just way out in the woods. It's on the outskirts of civilization as the towns start to go into the woods. We're starting to find that out as well.
You was talking about on the outskirts of civilization. And I've noticed that a lot of national and state parks, like, that's where most of these things are at. Like these national parks, state parks, these national recreation centers, like the lakes, the county recreation places, the lakes, this and that. And sometimes I wonder if they go there because they know there's no hunting there, or because, like there's got to be a reason why that they're always, always right there in them areas, more than anywhere else.
It is some weird things for sure. After you start getting more and more into this, and you had your visual sighting and then other things happen as well, did you notice that this affected you when you would go back to your home, or did it seem like, the Bigfoot stuff would stay out in the woods?
They follow me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they throw rocks on top of the house. They'll slap the walls, which, you know what I think of it as? Now, you've heard of ding dong ditch, right? How the kids will run up and they'll ring the doorbell and they'll run off.
Yeah, we have that.
Think of it as, yeah, think of it as they're juveniles. These small guys, right? They have nothing else to do. They're bored in the woods and want to mess with humans. What they're doing is they're running up, slapping the house, and running off. It's nothing malicious. And you'll hear people get on there and very freaked out about this and like, oh my, this is it's the end of the world. No, it's just a game they're playing. And they'll, like, when they throw rocks at the top of the house. I mean, last year I got in my gutter and I got like probably 200 little stones out of my gutter. I mean, it's just little things that they do. Or they'll just go right on the edge of my property, right where the trees are, and they'll shake the trees. You can see the tops of the trees shaking. Or they'll try to imitate some, and they're good at that. They like to imitate owls a lot. And, because I've been out here so long listening, and I've taught myself to hear things other people don't hear, I guess, because I'm always listening for things. And I can tell kind of the difference when they're trying to imitate something or when it's a real owl, or when they're trying to imitate there's so many different things that they imitate. I've learned, and a lot of researchers don't know this yet, but I have actually learned from listening to my audio and finding the evidence from it that they'll take a stick and they will take one of those, the Y-shaped trees with the crotch trees, where they'll take the stick and they'll beat it in between it real hard. And they'll make it sound like a woodpecker. And I found this out because when I had my audio placed out in the woods, they actually did this near my audio recorder. And I found the tree that they were hitting in between it. Both sides were scratched up and the tree stuck in the ground right beside of it. So, and it didn't sound like, you can tell kind of the difference when you listen to the audio. And you can hear it sounds like a woodpecker, but it doesn't sound like a woodpecker. Like you can hear that's a little bit off. But for a normal person that's out in the woods and they hear that and like, oh, okay, woodpecker. So it's just little things. People don't realize there's more things that they will mimic than They're really good at that.
It sounds like you're using probably normal types of audio recorders in your research. Are you using any devices that might not be conventional, maybe on the fringes? I know if you're hanging out with Joe and Ron, you might have access to some cool toys out in the field.
Yeah, we've used about everything. Now they have found out that there is a small amount of radiation comes from the footprints. So I thought that was really cool. Like when they had found some of the prints in the ground, they actually put the Geiger counter next to it and it had the rings. So I thought that was really neat. But speaking of which, even down here, like there's a lot of, I didn't talk about this because I wanted to kind of focus on Sasquatch, but down in this area, it's very paranormal. It's, there's been UFOs. I actually, on my YouTube channel, I recorded quite a bit of them. Orbs, UFOs, just all kind of, an angel in my graveyard on my game camera. I actually captured. It looks just like an angel. Before I stopped recording the Sasquatch, because I won't try to record them anymore. It's pointless. It just makes them, when you get to a certain point in your research, you start realizing things. And I noticed that every time that I would try to record them, put game cameras up, or try to mess with them like that, they'd leave. If I want to learn about them, the best thing to do is, or if anybody does, stay away from the visual recorders, anything with visual, trying to record them like that. Now, audio, they don't mind so much, but if you try to get them on video, they're just going to leave, and they're not going to give you anything. And the best thing that I could tell anybody trying to figure out what's going on your property is to go buy some audio recorders, because they'll tell you a lot more than what the visual will. And there's a lot of paranormal. Sorry, I got off track. There's a lot of paranormal in the holler, like all kinds of orbs. Like if you watch the Small Town Monsters, me and Eli were seeing orbs all over the holler. Like, it's just very, very supernatural. And they do call it the Little Skinwalker Ranch of West Virginia, Southern West Virginia, because there's so much going on here. Like, it's unbelievable.
I remember talking to them a few years ago, and the radiation thing came up then. Have you found that that's just associated with the track itself in the ground, or is that also associated with casts as well?
Now, I've not got to buy me a Geiger counter yet.
Okay, gotcha.
So anytime that they're down here and we do research, we find things out like that together. But like, I mainly stick to, the best things that have, for me, is the less equipment that I use, the better evidence I can collect, to be quite honest. And I know that sounds crazy, but like, the audio is about as much as I use anymore. I mean, I used to use the game camera, and now I do have like a parabolic mic, which I use that a lot. And I do have like night vision and stuff like that. But honestly, like, you use that. If I go out and I get on using my night vision, they know something's going on. They can see me. That they know before I walk in the woods, they know I'm already there. I've got this weird thing on my eyes glowing. They're not gonna like stick around to see that. If I go in there just me, being me and doing what I do, they're more apt to want to kind of stay close, and they're not going to try to flee. And so the best evidence that I've ever got was with my audio, or just being out in the woods with them without anything.
So you just mentioned being out in the woods. Are you one that takes the approach more of go to an area and just kind of sit down and see what happens? Or are you actually, going out, finding an area and maybe hitting sticks on trees and etc.?
No hitting sticks on trees. Now, I used to do all that when I first started. They know it's you. They know it's you. When you go out there and you start beating on trees and start whooping and all this stuff, they're probably, I don't know that they're doing this. They're probably just sitting there going, what in the world is wrong with that person? But I don't do any of that. I'll go out in the woods. I'll sit in nature. I'll speak softly. Sometimes I'll sing. Sometimes I'll bring like a little tiny set of hand drums or something small like that, and just sit out there with them and talk and sing. And I found that there are ones that are not so good, and there's ones that are pretty cool. You know what I mean? But my advice is to be safe. Like, I don't want to tell anybody to go somewhere and just wander out there and start doing all this, because there are bad ones out there, and I don't want to get anybody hurt. I went out and I was casting a print one time I found in the bottom of a ravine, and it's the best. I have a picture of it. It's the best print that I have ever seen in my life. Like if I would have been able to cast this, it would have been absolutely amazing. But when I got down there, it was getting dark, and I didn't have my plaster with me. So I had to walk back up the mountain, get my plaster, and then try to walk down before it got dark. But I didn't quite make it, and I was down in the bottom of the ravine, and it was really dark. And it wasn't really dark, it was getting dark. And I had just poured the plaster in that track, and I had stepped about, I don't even know how far. I'm not good measuring things in my mind, but I think it was like maybe 50 feet away from it. And as soon as I stepped away, a giant tree fell on that cast. And then I heard whooping up on the right side of me, and then on the very top of the other side of the ridge, there were bam, 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 tree knocks. And I was flanked and followed out with little stones and stuff tossed at me the whole time, all the way out. And so, like, sometimes, you take anything you do, you take a chance on it. I don't want to deter people from nature because nature is amazing. Going out and just barefoot, grounding is amazing. Being out in the woods is amazing. And as long as you're not messing with them or trying to get their footprints, trying to aggravate them, they usually stay pretty good and far away from you. Unless they're curious. Sometimes they'll just take a peek or gander at you and watch you a little bit. But for the most part, they're usually not malicious.
Absolutely. I would think that most accounts I hear from witnesses, if you start getting in trouble, it's because you may have been trying to trick them in some way. And not to say that's what you were doing, but I'm saying
I was.
You were? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Fair enough.
I sure was.
Okay. Well, there you go. Yeah, it's I wouldn't recommend. I've heard a lot of really, really not good scenarios that can come up when you're trying to trick. So it's better just to, I think, and this is just my way of thinking of things, just kind of be out there, be open with what you're doing, have good intentions. Although you can't really force that. If you're a good person, you're going to have good intentions, right? And vice versa. Right. Have you heard anything out there like strange humming or buzzing noises? Okay, can we talk about that for a bit?
Yes. Yeah, actually, if you go and watch, hold on, this truck's going to go by. Hold on just a second. He has activity on his property too. He lives right above me. If you watch the Paranormal Horizons, we were out there investigating, and this strange buzzing sound. It sounded like a swarm of bees everywhere, but it was like it wasn't a swarm of bees. It was like it almost sounded like it, but didn't. And it was everywhere. And no matter which way you turned, it was everywhere. You couldn't distinguish which direction it came from. And it was really strange. And we couldn't come to any conclusion on what that was. Like, it was just the weirdest. And, that's not the first time I heard it. And the crazy part is, it must have been happening my whole life up there. Because it took them going, hey, what is that noise? For me to kind of like, wait, what? And then as they was explaining, I'm like, yeah, wait a minute. I do hear that, and I've got accustomed to it. That's been happening my whole life. So, whatever this is up here, it's weird. And they tried every which way to figure out what it was, and they couldn't figure it out. And that's not the only strange thing up there. Like, it's just that this place, when I was young, they tried to shelter us a lot from all this paranormal and craziness up there. They knew that this place wasn't right when I was young. They knew that. When we got a little bit older, they would kind of throw things out to, out to us to try to beware of this or beware of that, because I rode dirt bikes and four-wheelers and all this other stuff all my life. So I was riding up in the mountains my whole life. And, they would always try to, not directly tell us things were up there, but tell us things were up there. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I wonder if it was a thing where they almost felt locked into the area where they're at, not most people. If you live in an area, you got to live there. You don't have the luxury of just moving because you feel like it, right? Which would make it even more crazy, to have an issue or have a really paranormally charged area and you're just locked into it and you can't do anything, man.
Right. And not only that, but this was their property, like for generations, our families, for generations upon generations. They're not just gonna. And we're Appalachian people. We're real tough people. Stuff like that is not going to run us off. It's going to aggravate us for a little while until we get used to it, and then we just deal with it, to be honest. And that's how, we were raised, to just deal with stuff. And it'll pass, say the Lord's Prayer if it gets too bad, or, we were taught that stuff. Say the Lord's Prayer. If you say the Lord's Prayer, things will get easier. It'll go away. And like there were times, if you want me to tell you a couple of the paranormal things up there, I can.
Real quick, just so it doesn't go away. So was the humming noise ever recorded?
They tried to record it.
Okay.
It didn't. You can almost like, it's like you think you can hear it. We think we can hear it, but I don't think that it was really loud enough for the audio to. It was like how you would hear bees in the distance, but a lot of them,
gotcha.
You can't really record that. It's hard to record that.
Yeah, I just bring it up. There's a Doug Hijack's group has been really looking into that recently. They noticed that it has a
I didn't know.
Yeah, it's a pretty big deal over the last few months, and different researchers from around the U.S. are recording this. They're doing experiments with a certain type of tuning fork. The sound from the tuning fork has been replicated back to them from the woods in certain areas that have high Bigfoot activity, which is really, really interesting. That's everywhere from, I think the main place is Connecticut that's been going on, but I'm pretty sure it's been other places as well throughout the U.S., but that might be something to look into as well. Chris Reinhardt has been doing a lot of stuff with that. But so you mentioned that there's been paranormal things that have been going on as well.
Yeah, we've had the paranormal going on since we were little. My mom has seen her doppelganger in that holler. My aunt has seen her doppelganger in that holler. There have been black shadow figures seen there numerous times. There's one of the black shadow figures that likes to jump off of the top of buildings and run around the holler. It's weird. We've had, when my mom was little, when they worked on the railroad, they had people from all over come over and work on the railroad in the Appalachian Mountains. And they were Chinese people that worked on the railroad tracks. Well, when my mom was sleeping one night, she woke up to a Chinaman standing above her, looking down at her. Now, the house that wood that was used to build that house was also pulled off of a haunted house to build that little house. So that probably could have had something to do with it also, because in the big house, they used to hear footsteps walking up and down the steps, and you could feel a person sitting down on the bed with you, but there wasn't nothing there. And then they tore apart the big house and built that part of the little house. So I'm not sure if that had something to do with it. My grandfather witnessed a wagon wheel that was on fire that ran across the top of the mountain and went down the holler. Ghosts, numerous amounts of ghosts. Like I could probably speak on this for hours and still not get done telling all the true ghost stories in this holler. And they're not just stories, they're our lives. We've lived, what people don't understand is we've lived this. And we've had to endure it our whole lives. And the things here, they're not normal. This is not a normal area. And there's got to be something. Hold on a minute. There's got to be something drawing all this in. I mean, this area has got to be a high frequency area. It's got to have something going on with it. We've got creeks and streams and there's 6 natural springs up in that holler. A lot of things to produce energy. It's so paranormal. I have tried to figure out, why is this area so active? And still I can't. I don't know. It's just, and like the orbs in the sky at nighttime, like the other night, I recorded one that was just, it was an orb in the sky just blinking, and I got a picture of it, and if you zoom in, it looks like it has little lights all around it. It's round, and it's got little lights all around it and a circle in the middle. Like, these things are weird here. It gets weird here. And then in my house, like, I'll be laying there watching TV or in bed trying to sleep, and an orb just float right by. Like, the things that we experience, and it's funny because we get used to this stuff. So any other person would probably jump up and freak out. But where we've had to deal with this all our lives, it's like, oh, there went an orb, like, oh, there's an orb out there. Or I just heard something weird up in the woods. Like, and then we'll go about our day. Like, so this is how we have to live our lives. Because if we was to dwell or, get freaked out about everything that we have to encounter, we wouldn't have a life to live. It would be just living in fear constantly.
Absolutely. So it almost sounds like, man, you're really investigating this just because you live there and you have to deal with it. I mean, there's no way you couldn't notice it. It's happening all around you, right?
Yes. Yeah. Now the paranormal, I do investigate that also, but like that is why I investigate the paranormal. Now the Sasquatch is a little bit different. The reason I investigate them is because I'm intrigued. Like, I want to find out the truth, and it doesn't matter what anybody thinks about me or says about me, or I don't even care if anybody goes to my channel, to be quite honest. I like that, but it doesn't matter to me because the truth is what matters to me. The data is what matters to me, and getting down to the bottom of all this is what matters to me. And without disrespecting the Sasquatch people, of course, like I did.
Absolutely. So just to talk a few minutes about this. So you have your own channel now, and so are you actively going to put up videos that have to do with things that are happening in the holler then?
Yeah, I have been. Like I try to avoid recording Sasquatch. Like when I go into the woods, I'll always say, I've got a video, because like that taught me a lesson when that tree came down and it crushed that cast. Like the cast was still wet and it just destroyed it. That could have been me standing under there. So when I'm recording, when I have my video recorder and I'm walking, I'll say, don't get in the frame. I'm just recording your structures. I'm just looking around, this, that. But, it taught me a valuable lesson about, if I was to walk straight in somebody's home and shove a recorder in their face, they're not going to be too happy about it. And I'm not doing that to them. And I could care less if I get a video of them. That's not the point of this right now. The point of this is to learn, and I'm not going to learn nothing if I shove a video camera in their face. But yeah, I am. I put a lot of stuff on my channel, like I even caught a triangle UFO. It had 3 white lights and 1 red light in the middle blinking. It was really strange. And I've caught numerous of them orb things, numerous amounts of those. When I first started this, I did get pictures of Sasquatch. I think I got 3 or 4 pictures of Sasquatch. They're not clear, of course, but I went there and I do research. I research my stuff, and I'll go back to the area and take pictures and make sure that it wasn't there before. But I got on game camera, when I used to put my game camera up, I got a Sasquatch stepping over a log, and it's really, really distorted, but you can see that he's there, and I checked the next frame and nothing there. Also, when I was driving down the holler, I got one that was hiding, sitting down over a bank, and his shoulders and head was up, and it's blurry, of course, because that's all you get with them. And I caught him there. And then at the park where I was at, I was walking around telling how I set my audio recorders out. And when I panned the camera around, looked like a female Sasquatch. You can see her body. And it looks like she even has breasts and, a female body. And there was one more. When we were camping, I actually took a picture of something looking in the window at me and the kids. And you can see clear forehead and eyes. And I mean, you can see the eye and everything, but it's blurry, of course, like all their pictures. You can't, it's hard to get a good picture. Now, the one good picture that I did get, you can see the head, you can see the face, you can see the eyes, ears, mouth, the hump on the head, everything. Now, it is zoomed in a little pixelated, but you can see it all. So, and I did used to do all that. I don't know more. I don't try to get them on video, but yeah, when I used to do that, when I used to try to disrespect them like that, I did get some videos. I even got one with eye glowing, their eye shine. And I've noticed with the eye shine, it's not always a red eye shine. They can have red or green eye shine. I noticed that the mother will have the babies to walk in their footprints. And a lot of other things do this too, to avoid the smell. And I've casted like quite a few prints with a baby print inside of it. And they had stopped gifting. I mean, they stopped accepting my gifts for like 8.5, 9 months. And when they started accepting my gifts again, I find these little prints inside mother's prints. So that tells me that they carry also about the same time that we do, which I thought that was really cool.
Oh, yeah, like the same duration. Yeah, that's cool.
And they stopped gifting. I don't know why, but they stopped accepting gifts, maybe for protection, like in case that it's tainted or whatever.
Right. The pictures you were talking about, are those on your YouTube channel then? Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, they're on the posts.
Awesome.
I think they're on the posts on my YouTube, on my posts. Some of my casts are on like the thumbnail, and I put them on my page too. You have to look around for some of my stuff, because like I said, my main intention's not like anything other than getting the truth. And that's what's important to me. Like, and telling the truth. Like I can't stand hearing people when they refer to them as animals. It bothers me, because I guess where I've learned so much from them and being out there with them, knowing that, how intelligent that they really are, and seeing all the things that they do. When I hear people talk about, just being a animal, it bothers me.
I can get that, definitely, especially after you've had things shown to you as you have. But Beth, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show and for sharing what you've experienced over the years and what's going on down there in that holler. It sounds like it's a really intense time, and it's probably not going to let up. Stuff will still continue to happen.
For sure. It most definitely will. And I'll keep you guys updated on it.
Before we go, do you mind taking a few minutes to remind people how they can keep up to date with what you've got going on in that area?
Yes. You'll find my YouTube channel. It is Sasquatch and Paranormal in Wineberry. My name is Beth Duncan. If you go on Wild and Weird West Virginia and you look under Wineberry, you'll find the very first video that we did where Joe and Ron found the very first footprint in the holler. And it's called, Did We Find Evidence of Bigfoot in West Virginia? Also, Joe and Ron's work, The Paranormal Horizons with Small Town Monsters, I did 3 with them, which is Mystery Lights and Sasquatch Holler, The Sasquatch Mountain of Madness, and Sasquatch Unleashed. I did a little hour thing on the Cryptid podcast. It's called Bigfoot Hollers in West Virginia. I also did, with just Small Town Monsters, the Mountain State Edition, What's in Their Woods. And I appreciate you guys giving me the time to do this.
Thank you so much for coming on the show today, Beth.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Bigfoot Society podcast. Every encounter we share reminds us that the world is bigger and stranger than we think, and that the truth is often hiding just beyond the tree line. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe to the channel on YouTube, hit the bell so you don't miss the next episode, and share this with a friend who's into mysteries, monsters, or the unexplained. And if you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcast, please follow the show there and leave us a 5-star positive review, because all that helps more people discover the show. And remember, if you or someone you know has had a Bigfoot sighting, please, I'd love to hear from you. So email me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com and let's start the conversation. If you haven't gotten a chance yet, check out our membership community over at www.bigfootsocietypodcast.com. And that's where you can hear tomorrow's episode today, early and ad-free, and members-only episodes every week. Also, it's a place to connect with other people that are into the Bigfoot subject as much as you are. Thanks again for following along with the Bigfoot Society. Until next time, keep your eyes open, trust your gut, and never stop asking what else might be out there. And see you in the woods.